Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, brought to you by Gray Duck Vodka. I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. Here with Mr. Joe Oberle. How you doing, man?
Good morning.
It's a dreary morning, but we have some juicy Vikings news to talk about. The draft happened. The draft party happened. You were out at TCO on Thursday night, and then you beat us all home from Prior Lake on Friday night because of the longest trade down, I think, in team history.
That was pretty epic. I didn't know. I thought that could happen during the draft. I didn't know if it would happen at that point when it did, and I didn't know it would be that extensive. He just went on and on and on. And I was driving an hour and a half that night after I left the party, and I was listening on the radio, and I was just laughing because everybody was sitting around waiting for that.
I felt it got to the point. Yeah, it got to the point where we were there. I think we had the last pick of the night. Is the way it. Yeah, that is how it ended up. The Vikings ended up with the last pick, and meanwhile, all the people at Legends Golf Course are trying to clean up around us, and we're like, we just want to go home. Man, it went from.
Rick.
Yeah, I think they said that's the 30th. As of the third round, the picks that he had, 'cause I think he did another trade on the day after that. That was the 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th trades of his short tenure as the GM of the Vikings since 2012. So he likes to trade.
He likes to amass picks. He likes to get numbers, and I have had over the years. I've had a little problem with it. I'm not sure I quite understand it from his perspective, I guess I tell myself that if the more bullets you got in the gun, the more chances you are going to hit somebody is what it comes down to. The other point being is, at some point, these draft picks are all not separated by that much. They're all kind of, especially as you get in the later rounds. The earlier rounds, you're going to get blue chippers, and you don't want to trade away those. And but as you get later on, if you really think about it realistically, the difference between 253 and 254 might not be that big. So you have to kind of tell yourself that and make sure you're filling your needs that you have. When it comes to grabbing a long snapper at the end of the draft, it kind of also says to me, well, Rick, it looks like you had too many picks. I don't know.
We were debating the logic of it and what the difference is that late in the draft. And then on the other end of it, you have how much of a difference is it between, let's say, 93 and 102? Is that a difference tangible enough to warrant any value you might get? I watched the press conference he gave on Friday night this morning, and it sounded like he didn't really. I mean, he explained it to the media in a Spielman-esque way, so he wasn't really showing his hand. But it sounds like what I gleaned from it, outside of what you said, which was, the more bullets, the higher chance you have of making a hit, especially late in the draft. I think he likes having the flexibility of making a move, like having the draft capital to trade up if they have to, or if they catch wind that a guy that they really like any of the first couple guys that they grabbed. Well, not so much a Bradbury, but an Irv Smith Jr. or a Madison at running back, who seemed to be their guy that the scouts really were we're looking for, that they like to be able to, if they get a call at the 23rd hour and say, okay, well, someone 5 picks ahead of you is going to take him, maybe they can have the capital to make that move too.
Yeah, that's possible, but it's like he trades up in the history of his dealing. The number of times he's traded up is minuscule compared to trading down. He's the guy that other teams trade with to trade up.
Yeah, that's true too.
So I don't know. I'm not gonna completely throw him under the bus and say it's wrong, because I'm not in this position and I don't know. I gotta believe that Mike Zimmer gets a little frustrated, especially after the entire major portion of the draft, early part, was gone to offense, and it's Mike's turn to bolster his defense, and all of a sudden they're moving down and down and down and down. It's like, well, we need to take some bodies here, Rick. We got to have some bodies in camp. But he's drafted well, I think, in general. I mean, you can nitpick selections here and there, but he's hit on quite a few, and I think his percentage is pretty good.
Yeah,
but. That's just going from memory and not from actual.
Yeah, it seems to be his reputation too as a draft master, and we've talked about some of our nitpicks or just criticisms that we've had. I will say that I in retrospect, in my attempting to turn on the microphone to boo the Irv Smith Jr. pick, that I don't want to be a contrarian either, like. And my dad will be very upset with this as he listens to the show, because I think you saw the apple isn't too far from the tree, both in regards to how I looked like my dad and how I reacted to a pick from the SEC the same way that he did. But, in the lead up to the draft and the shows that we've done, I thought the best case scenario would have been for the Vikings to take 2 offensive linemen in the first 3 picks. They did 2 out of the first 4 picks, but they also got they cheated their way around that with the first pick, kind of upgrading, at least on paper, 2 positions at center and at guard, with Elflein presumably moving to guard. And so the first 4 picks being offense, I didn't think would happen. It did. And we'll talk about what our thoughts are on those players, but at the same time, I thought for sure Zimmer would get a defensive player before the 5th round. So I'm happy with it. It's hard to grade these things because you don't know how these players are going to turn out and so on and so forth, but at the same time, they did what I wanted them to do, so I can't necessarily be mad that they took the positions I wanted, but not from the schools that I wanted, if that makes sense.
Oh my goodness! But you wanted to be mad, though, didn't you, Joe?
Oh, of course. It's my default reaction. So I feel uncomfortable otherwise.
Well, you just have to put a placeholder in it and check back in 3 years and see how they've done. I mean, the thing you should do actually is go back now and judge draft from 3 years ago, because we never, ever do it. Nobody does. We all say, oh, my God, I got to get my grades out on the website. I got to get my grades out. Got to grade this draft, and what you're doing is basically taking what you speculated on for months and then repeating it, because it's kind of silly at this point to really have a grade that you think is viable. I mean, go back 3 years ago, see what that draft was, see where they are now, and then give it a draft grade. That's what they should do, and we should be doing that in the run up to the draft. Be grading these drafts from 3, 4, 5 years ago, and really take a look at how Rick has done, in those, and then watch it as it goes forward, because we won't know. We don't even know which of these guys are going to make the team or not. They got undrafted free agents that might get on there. They picked up a quarterback in the undrafted free agent group, and you never know. He could beat out one of those other 2 guys. So it's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is. You look at guys that are sure things, like a Khalil, for example, not working out, but If there is a sure thing, I guess. I mean, Bradbury seems like as close of a sure thing as you can get, I guess, with the caveat or the comparison being Khalil.
Based on what though? What are you basing that on?
Just draft speak.
Yeah, right. Well, I like it because it's a position. I mean, you said it earlier. It gives them some flexibility on the line, which they really prize. He's a guy that can get out and move, and a good match for their zone scheme, blocking scheme. And I think Elflein had a decent first year, but he had a bad second year, and if we don't know yet which one of those is going to play guard. It could be Bradbury, but I like the fact that he seems like he's just listening to him talk on the phone when I was at TCO and they were doing the interview with him. He really likes football. He wants to be on the field. He wants to play. He looks like I don't know if he's a mauler, but he's competitive as heck, and I think. We'll see where it goes. He might be a little small. I'm not sure on that, but so I'm remembering that right. But I like what it does for him, and we'll see where it takes him this spring.
Yeah, I mean the last few episodes of the show, I floated out the idea that perhaps they'd move Elflein to guard, and there was the quote from his rookie season where he said he was more comfortable playing guard than center, that I think we talked about last week. But to be completely honest with you, I didn't expect that to happen. I don't expect most things I say to happen, so I'm as surprised as anybody when they do. And
well, it hasn't happened yet.
That's true. Also, I guess. The quote that's sticking out to me, and I forget who said it or where I heard it, but was the quote that in reviewing tape, it's really hard for a center to kind of stand out because there's such a utilitarian role, and that there's not a lot of centers that bowl people over backwards or do these. The way that the position works, you're not going to get a bunch of home run plays on tape. And they had, whoever had said it, said that Bradbury had one of the most explosive tapes of a center they had ever seen. I did like the question becomes, I guess, also in my leanings towards thinking that he'll be the center is, would they have taken him that high, one way or the other? It's a good question. If he wasn't going to be their guy, I think. There's a list of like less than 10 centers that have been taken in the first round since the new millennium, and all of those guys have been relative studs, like Nick Mangold, for example. And so that combined with Spielman's presser on it and saying that at no point did they consider trading down, which was a big theory that people had. If they were looking for interior linemen, they can trade down because they're not historically guys that are taken as high as tackles. And he said that they didn't even consider it because they were so enamored with what he was doing.
Well, he was their guy. He was their guy from a long ways out, and I think they would have taken him even sooner if they had the higher pick. They had the need, and they had the player. Don't they say that for a zone blocking scheme, it's built around your center?
Yeah.
So it's like if you've got a guy that's going to fit that role, and that's it kind of demonstrates the influence that Gary Kubiak has had since he came to town, him and Rick Dennison. So that they I like the fact that what Rick said, that, or maybe it was Zimmer who said that Kubiak had spent last year scouting college players, and they love this guy from the get-go. And so did they maybe fall in love with the guy too much at the extent of somebody else? Perhaps. There's talk about Lindsey that might have been a good player, but they weren't high enough to get him. But I think they really liked him. I think that they had the need, and they got it. So I don't know how you can grade this particular pick at this point any lower than a A- at the worst. I think it's great,
especially if you're looking at it as a whole and saying that by providing flexibility with Elfline, you're at worst benefiting multiple positions.
And I didn't just grade that position. I would be disingenuous of me if I did, since I just spent the two minutes ripping on that prospect. That anyway.
I was surprised a little bit by the reaction from some of the more draft-oriented guys on the Purple PTSD Vikings territory Slack that were leaning towards taking one of the available tackles, and I think they were more surprised that some of the guys were available that were available, but I think having Bradbury and Elfline and figuring out who goes where is a better prospect than bringing in one of those guys as a rookie on the edge and
moving Reef inside.
Yes,
absolutely.
Just based on Reef's limited experience at that position. So I couldn't be any happier with the first pick. We'll see how it shakes out. But
what would you rather do? I mean, take a center who has played it 2 years in the NFL, one of them injury plagued, and then has recently played a guard in college, and move him, or play a guy that's been playing tackle for the past how many years in the NFL and try to make him a guard. It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, it was funny. It was the names that were being mentioned on Slack and elsewhere were Andre Dillard, that he was on the board, and so was Juwan Taylor. Well, Taylor didn't go till well into the second round, if I recall correctly. So something was up there, to be for sure. And he had been talked about as going in the top 10, top 15 at one time. How about that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you feel for the guys, but it is amazing to see some of this stuff shake out the way that it did. I think some of the guys were just surprised those guys were available, but they made the right move. And speaking of initial reactions, I've already kind of prefaced this, but in watching some of the tape and learning a little bit more about their second pick, Irv Smith Jr., I liked the pick more than I did at the time. I guess I couldn't have hated it any more than I did at the time either, so that's not saying much. But he seems to be, I think that the quote that he used was perhaps not coincidental, because it seems like the quote from a lot of the people scouting him leading up to the draft, which was versatile. The quote that he used on Vikings.com was, I want to be known as a versatile tight end. A lot of the summaries of the draft scouting was that he's very versatile. There's really nothing he can't do in regards to catching the ball and blocking. So I think my initial reaction was that he was going to be another Kyle Rudolphian sort of pass-catching tight end that won't be able to block as much, which might limit the amount of time that he'll be able to play with Rudolph simultaneously in two tight end sets, because it'll be pretty clear that they're passing if that would have been the case, but it appears not to be. And so I want your take on the pick, and I also, there was a lot of talk of whether or not they would ask Rudolph to restructure. That they came out and said that he wouldn't. Initial reaction at the party was that maybe they'll move on from Rudolph now, or try to find a trading partner. My reaction was if they were going to be doing that, I wish they would have done it before free agency started, because that would have opened up some things. But you can't really have your cake and eat it too. So, just your thoughts on the pick. But
can too. I had some cake the other day and I ate it. What the heck?
Yeah, that I've never understood that saying, to be honest, because who wants cake if you can't eat it?
Right. I personally think that you, and by extension your dad, are conferenceists or SECists.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Big Ten elitists.
You get too caught up in where they're coming from and who the player is, and I guess I'll wait and see how he does. I thought it was well, we heard coming in that it was a good draft for tight ends, and the one went in the top 10, which is rare. And so you knew there were some good ones out there. So I think it was
two from the same school in the first round.
That's amazing. It's the Vikings like their tight ends. I think Gary Kubiak likes his tight ends. Kirk Cousins had made hay with his tight ends in Washington. My biggest concern about this, I'm happy with the pick. I hope he's a better blocker than we're hearing that he is. And I thought that's what I heard coming out, that he has some skills in that regard. He isn't like Rudolph was when he came in. Rudy had to really work to get better as a blocker, and he's made some improvement. I wouldn't say he's Gronk in that regard. So, but my only concern is him and what they're going to do there. You know that contract has got a huge target on it. It's big this year, and it's even bigger cap hit next year. And there was some steam coming into the draft. Even on the day of the draft, as I was coming in, I heard that Albert Breer reporting that they were connecting the Vikings and the Patriots regarding Rudolph. There's obviously been talking about it. And I don't think the Patriots drafted a tight end in this draft, if I recall. Maybe correct me on that, but and if they didn't, that's pretty strange since they lost Gronk, and Rudy's got the body type. He's not the player Gronkowski is, but Drew Mahal, we know well at this site, had a text that I saw on Care 11 TV, in fact, the other night, and after the draft about pointing out that the only people with better stats, touchdown and yards, I think, since 2012 are Zach Ertz and I want to say Travis Kelce, but then Rudolph. So
wow.
Rudolph has, he's become a very, very good player. He hasn't shaken the reputation of being brittle, but he has stayed on the field in the last 3 or 4 years much better than he did it earlier in his career.
Yeah,
and he's probably getting paid too much with this contract, but that's how they do it when they restructure him. They backload him so that when you come to that time that you're getting diminishing returns on that money, you can unload him. And so it's a definite possibility. I'd hate to see it. I think he's a great guy, great for the community, great for the team. I think he does have a lot that he can offer, and it would be fun to see him and the other tight ends they have, but I don't know that you can keep 4 on the roster, and that's what they have right now. So we'll see what happens.
You are right. The Patriots didn't draft a tight end. And I did find it interesting that, and I understand why they did it, but Rudolph's agent released a statement saying that every year for the past 3-4 years, the Vikings have drafted a tight end, and Rudolph's been on the team every year after that.
Yep.
I think that's
true.
That is true, but I don't think they've taken anyone obviously as high as, or as, from as much as it kills me to say it, is from an elite program like Alabama. Either, I mean, he feels a lot more like the heir apparent than he does feel like an immediate guy that will just
replaces him.
Yeah, but then on the other side of it, I think I mentioned this on the show about 50 times, but I went to Kyle Rudolph's youth camp last year, and we were talking about, God, it's funny how time works out. We were talking about the DiFilippo hire and whether or not he expected to do two tight end sets, and he said not just 2, 3. I mean, look at what he did in Philadelphia, and I'm super psyched for that, and clearly that didn't end up being the case. I mean, they did some of that, but from a blocking perspective, out of necessity more than anything. So the idea of doing that excites me. I think it is more realistic because Kubiak was more of a tight end, old school sort of like tight end, I formation running type offensive coordinator than DiFilippo or even Stefanski are as these neo offensive coordinator youngins. So I think that's a possibility, but I would not be surprised if we went on the internet right now and saw that Rudolph was sent somewhere. Getting something from the Patriots would be nice too, just because Boston's been on the winning end of all these Minnesota trades across multiple sports, and it'd be nice to get a little bit of blood out of them. But
yeah, never happens.
Considering who's making those trades, I don't see that happening. So, I mean, I like the pick. I think he's has the potential to be really, really good. I mean, looking at some of his highlight film is awesome. I mean, it's college, like we said, it's a crapshoot. They're going against guys who will end up being insurance salesmen and not pros. But man, he's got some 80-yard touchdowns on 5-yard passes. He's got some ability, man. Is that the kind of players they're playing when they play for the national title every year? I wonder about that. Oh yeah, well, third round pick. So I did also want to mention that my negative reaction to that pick, I'm really trying to wash my hands of it as much as possible now. I can tell. I thought, well, if they're going to take another offensive player, they should have taken a running back. I didn't expect them to do both, at least not back to back. And so my whole dream draft of running back guard, I felt was out the window at that point. I figured they'd go with a DB of some sort in the third round. They didn't end up doing that. I did feel like some of the guys and some people, readers, so on and so forth, were confused about who they selected, mainly because he seems to not be physically like a carbon copy of Latavius Murray, but when you hear Spielman talk about him, he compared him physically to exactly that person, Latavius Murray. He's a between the tackles runner. He's the quote is that he's a bell cow that gets better with more carries. Now, whether or not, I think that was the drawback too, is people said, well, he's not very good until you, like an AP, you give him 20 carries. So what's he going to do in limited use behind Dalvin Cook? But as we've seen with Dalvin Cook, he's yet to play a full season. So I like the pick. I think he's a lot more of a physical runner than people are giving him credit for. He was in the top 10 for every running back category last year. Yards, touchdowns. He catches passes out of the backfield relatively well. I was happy with that pick. I don't know who else. I mean, I like the Zigbo from Nebraska better, maybe because he looked more like Latavius Murray, but I think the difference is negligible, to be honest. Well, I heard Courtney Cronin from Score North, or she's from ESPN yesterday, talk about it, and I really thought she summed it up well by saying that when you look at what the Vikings did with their first 4 picks, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, was 2 linemen, tight end, and a running back. What do you think they're going to do next year? Yeah. And exactly what Zimmer's been crabbed about, to the public and not to the public, about getting a running game going. So I know that's what Gary Kubiak got going out in Denver when they eventually won the Super Bowl. It wasn't because they had Peyton Manning at quarterback, I'll tell you that much. Not in his final year, but so I think they're going to run the ball, and they took, they spent a lot of huge draft capital on it. I was surprised they took a running back that high. Yeah. I really was, but it signals to me now that they're going to at least line up and act like they're going to run and run the ball and try to keep people off Kirk Cousins' backs, A, with the lineman, and B, with the fact that they got to be they can't sell out the run. They got to be prepared for it. So it was. I think this guy was being good. I heard him described as a bowling ball, a little bit more so than
Latavius Murray was, and he will fill that role really well. I don't know that you have to worry about getting him the carries if he can learn to pound right out of the gate in his limited role. You never know what's going to happen, but I think I'm glad that he's that kind of runner, because he's not the same as Dalvin Cook then, so that you do have a little lightning and thunder, and it may not be the exciting deep passing game that you and I appreciate, but if it wins ball games, I don't care one iota.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were interpreting the Bradbury pick and even the next pick, the Samia pick, as help for Cousins in the passing game, and you alluded to it there. I mean, I think the focus, Bradbury's is really good in the run too, which we didn't really touch on that much. I think Drew Samia is too, and so you're kind of, where do you separate one from the other? Supporting the run game helps Cousins, but I think that they realized maybe a year too late that Cousins isn't going to be this complete franchise quarterback in the same vein as speaking of Big Ten, I was going to say Drew Brees or Tom Brady, but he in a system with some help, he can be an elite system guy. You just can't count on him to carry the entire offense and somehow shake two defenders by himself. So I'm super excited about the improvements that they've done to the run game. And you just look at this team as a whole, some of the young talent that they have. The run game's really young. The outside of Kyle Rudolph, the tight ends, the wide receivers that are locked in now for the foreseeable future. Everyone's all of the guys on defense that are under 30. I mean, this team is primed to make a good deep run for many years to come. So I'm excited about that.
I agree with that statement, what you just said there. But I don't hear. I've heard places where it's just the opposite. They say that they're trying to win now with these draft picks, and that they don't have any long term. I go, what are you talking about? They drafted a center that hopefully plays for the next 10 years. They drafted another lineman that adds some depth, if not a starting position right away. The tight end's the tight end of the future, not just the present. Kyle Rudolph is still the tight end. I don't know. I did not get that assessment about the draft. I think that they've done some great things to not only potentially, certainly improve on last year's team right now, but get better going forward. And if they find that they have made the right choices, then they can make a more informed decision on Kirk Cousins next year.
Yeah.
On whether or not you re-sign him, or you really start looking for your next franchise quarterback.
So I think you can do both, right? You can
absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, and I think some people think of it from a binary perspective, like you could only do one or the other.
Right.
But this team is, outside of the experiment at quarterback, they are pretty much set up everywhere else until 2022. So it's something where, ironically, the fear that I had was Haskins falling to 18, and then having the argument of people saying, well, if they didn't have Cousins, they could have taken him, or me being Ohio State nerd saying, oh man, it would have been great to have him, but we had Cousins. That didn't end up happening, but yeah, I think that this management team has done a really good job of doing that across the board, from drafting to how they've set up these contracts to not really put all of their chips into one particular thing, despite the fact that they've done certain things that do feel like win now, like the trade for Sam Bradford, for example, was kind of a desperation move that they had to make. Kirk Cousins felt that way, but it didn't feel like that last year at this time after the draft because they didn't seem to be shoring up the offensive line very much. So
I don't think so. I don't think that was a desperation move. I think you went out to get a quarterback, and that was the best guy available. The amount of money maybe have been desperation and guaranteed contract that you needed to pay to get him, but I don't. Sam Bradford was not necessarily win now. It was do not go in the complete tank now. They had to do that. They didn't have a quarterback 2 days before their season started. So I was, I totally get that. I would, I am reserving. I said, you heard me say it many times, it's a 3-year project with Cousins. If we don't see market improvement this year, even though the line is going to have to take some time to get together and figure out who it is too. But we better see, with everything they've done for the offense this year and this coaching staff, which I'm really starting to get excited about. I really like, Kubiak's got a pedigree that he's bringing here, and he's got his staff with him, and they're gonna bring up Stefanski right and allow him to succeed, and they should put something new, fresh, and with new faces and new players and a new line. If we don't see improvement this year, then you really got to take a hard look at Kirk Cousins and consider that a failure, because I think they're doing what they can for him, and they're going to put out a really good running game. They've got excellent receivers right now on the roster. They've got one really good tight end, and they've got one that they're going to bring up and who's athletic and going to he's going to get on the field and do some things this year, and if they're missing anything, it might be they're probably going to look at tackle next year, but I think I'm bullish on where this offense is going, and this is a make or break year for Cousins.
For sure.
The excuses have got to go away. He's got to go out and perform. And, his numbers were great last year, but he's got to win ball games. He's got to figure out how to do that. So we'll see.
Yeah, Sean Borman, our buddy from Vikings territory, drafted out a the depth at each position on the offensive line. And it's amazing what they've done from the rightful panic from people like me when free agency started, and I think they had one offensive guard on the entire roster in Danny Isadora, to now they have 3 guys at both guard spots, from Klein to the guys they've drafted. Samia, I liked his quote, I think, was, "I'm not the sexiest pick, but I'm the nastiest player in the entire draft." I think that's the kind of guy you want at that position.
That's what Zimmer likes. Yeah, he's always said that.
liked that too. I remember the big quote from him is he liked maulers, and he seems to be in that vein. So I think Sperano would be happy with the pick as well. He was on a unit in 2018 in Samia that won the, what's the guy's name? Joe Moore, I think it was, the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line unit in the country. Although I didn't go to Wisconsin is beyond me, but that's a topic for a different show.
Well, look at how there were so many. Joe, there were so many of them drafted early in this draft. I think that bears it out that line that he was on with Oklahoma was there was a lot of players going, and I'm just going to go out. Did the Vikings get the right one? Because all of them were getting drafted. So
yeah.
But then you're a Big Ten guy, so
I liked Michael Dieter, the guy from Wisconsin, and they have had some great guys.
I think they've had better lines in the past. I think they've had better lines in the past than this one. This one was good, but the Badgers had a down year. So.
Yeah, they were expected to be good. I don't know how that ended up panning out. I don't think they panned out too well, but point being, Oklahoma is a good team. They play a pro style of offense. They're not a spread offense with these little offensive linemen that people were worried about even finding enough talent to put together pro offensive lines, because nobody does that in college anymore. And so I think he's a great pick. Where he ends up, whether he'll be a starter or a depth guy remains to be seen. But I think you couldn't be any more pleased with how the first 4 rounds ended up panning out. I think he's a great pick. I think along with Bradbury and Elflein and all that, I'm excited.
So suddenly Josh Klein's contract of $7 million he's going to be paid this year seems like a lot. He didn't have a great year last year. He's an older guy. He got let go. So those are kind of red flags that you got to be concerned about. I like the idea that they picked somebody that's coming in with a little nasty, that has a good reputation, and if you can, if he in fact does surpass Klein, Samia, and you've got sophomore on the right tackle, you've got a rookie and in the next 2 positions, and you've got a second-year man maybe in the next position of the guard, and the odd man out is the old man Reef. So you've got a young, mobile line, and you really are setting yourself up for what's going on in the future. And if you can solidify yourself and show signs that this is the way to go, then suddenly, and your quarterback can take advantage of it. Suddenly, you're looking forward ahead with a lot of optimism, and so that's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. We'll see what happens when they get to rookie camp this week, when and then you got the OTAs coming up. So we'll see, but I'm excited about it. I'm glad they finally were serious about addressing the line, and we'll see how it changes the prospect for this team.
And we'll see what happens too with Reef. I know a lot of people, a lot of our writers have been quick to move on from him or transition him into the guard role, which we talked about earlier. Looking at his year and even Elflein's year, playing next to a couple of liabilities at guard, either on both sides in regards to Elflein or to his right for Reef, and you have to wonder if he has some quality play next to him, if maybe they can keep him around for a year and then draft his heir apparent or so on and so forth. But yeah, they're in a much better position than they were even a week ago or a few weeks ago. So, like you said, I mean, it all boils down to really going out and making sure that these pieces work. But there's going to be a very few excuses left to be had if things don't work out. So
look where we are compared to last year. Last year we were going into the season 3 or 4 days before it with the offensive line losing its emotional and actual leader.
Yeah.
He's gone, and from that point on, you're just treading water. You're trying to keep your head above water and make sure you don't get sucked under in this malaise that results from that. And this year it feels a lot different. You've got Kubiak / Dennison in there who know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they want. They're making draft picks to get that. They're going to put together a game plan. They're going to it's really put themselves their team their offense in a position to succeed. And so I'm the more I talk about it, the more excited I get.
Yeah. Which makes me a little bit nervous, to be honest, but I'd rather be nervous than despondent, I guess. The next few
you want me to go back to the Hatchet stories that the Dark Side Joe Oberly? Is that what you want me to?
I did enjoy his company while I was here. They took over the next few picks some defenders, a depth guy at linebacker, defensive tackle. A lot of people thought they might end up spending a first-round pick on that position, but I think they got a good value guy at 6. Mainly wanted to just talk a little bit about the wide receivers, as that might have the biggest week 1 impact on this roster and on this team. We didn't have a chance to really talk about Jordan Taylor coming in before the show last week, who's 27 years old. He is a Kubiak guy. He didn't play at all last year because I think he had double hip surgery or surgery on both hips. He's actually, which I did not know when we picked him up, he's the biggest wide receiver that the team has now. He's 6'5". I guess I just figured he might be more of a slot guy, a prototypical slot guy anyway. But he also can return punts, which I think is important with Sherrill's being gone. And the Vikings also drafted in the 7th round 2 receivers, Olabisi Johnson from Colorado State and Dylan Mitchell from Oregon. And they did a little segment on Mitchell on NFL Network, and a segment called "Diamonds in the Rough" from the draft. And one of the guys selected him, and basically said that he's got the potential to contribute right away because he doesn't play like a lot of young receivers do. He's capable of helping out his quarterback by kind of sitting down or not running, basically not just running around willy-nilly. When he sees that his quarterback needs to get rid of the ball, he'll make that happen, or he'll basically stop in his route and become open. He can be a slot guy, but he also has 4.4 speed, and the quote was QB friendly. So the question is whether you think that, I think we talked about this, you and I did at the party on Friday, whether you think they'll be looking for a hybrid slot deep ball guy, a slot guy that might eat into some of the flexibility that they have with guys like Thielen being so good lining up in the slot, or whether they'll have like an Aldrick Robinson situation where they have a guy that just comes on the field every 4th possession and just
scores a touchdown.
Pretty much. Like what they used to always say about Chris Carter when he was older. All he does is score touchdowns. I think you can have it both ways, but I think he'll he'll end up contributing more than Johnson or maybe even Taylor because he's got that deep ball ability.
You talking about Mitchell?
Yeah.
I think they drafted these later guys, and I think they're going to be early practice round guys. You know, you're going to give Taylor a chance to show what he's got and see how he fits in. You know, you got to remember, didn't he come from Denver, Jordan Taylor?
Yep.
And
Kubiak loved
so did Kubiak and Dennison. So I mean, they're going to give him a good look. They know what they know what he's got. He can give them, and they brought him in here for a reason. I think that'll allow people like Johnson and Mitchell to develop and maybe like you said, contribute on special teams or what have you. I think guys like Chad Beebe and Brandon Zylstra have better watch their back because they did pick up these young guys and they're going to give those guys a chance. They were just like Beebe and Zylstra coming in last year. You thought about those and watched them, how they progress through camp and to see if they can work their way on. But I like if you say that Dylan Mitchell's that raw, I think that's a guy that they'll develop, and if he's got the skills and the speed and the things that they want, that they'll bring him along. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can say who the third receiver is going to be yet. I don't think it's good. I suppose it's Laquan Treadwell since he's still on the roster, but I don't even know that for sure because I just don't think there could be somebody that flashes past him, and so
I think Zylstra was. Yeah, it is. I think. Well, at least I'll speak for myself. I expected Zylstra to be a lot more polished than he ended up being, or I'm assuming he ended up being because we never got to really see him. With his experience up in the CFL, and I think they gave up a decent amount to get him. I think there was a small bidding war for him.
Correct.
So you would have thought he would have contributed at all versus not at all, which is what ended up happening.
He did on special teams.
That's true.
Yeah, but that's about. We were all looking for more. I was with you on that.
And yeah, I mean, you heard stories or reports that he was struggling with concepts on the offense, and I just didn't expect that since he had pro experience, especially. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I will say one other surprise from the draft, and they, it's a Zimmer team, so they're always going to take a flyer on a prospect in the defensive backfield. But considering the news with Holton Hill and Mike Hughes not being 100% when the season started, I thought they might take a corner sooner than they did, which was not until the 7th round, which for Zimmer is they must have locked him in a room somewhere or something, kept the phones away from him.
It's interesting, Joe, too. I mean, as we talked a little bit earlier about how looking at this draft, what they're really leaning heavily towards the run game that Zimmer had talked about last year. There may not be as many positions available for wide receivers if the run game's more emphasized. So we'll see. That could play out too.
Yeah, there's going to be for corners too. You have to wonder how many spots they're going to have. There's going to be very few available roster spots. Especially bringing in that long snapper who was my pick of the draft. I wanted to do the whole show on the long snapper.
They should have somehow traded down to the last, and he could have been Mr. Irrelevant, and that would have been a better story. But I thought it was interesting how they had Ryan Suckup as introducing that last pick of the draft. Did you see that at all when they did it?
No.
He's a former Mr. Irrelevant, and he said, I was tailor-made. Not only was I the last player taken, but my last name is Suckup, so I was a writer's dream, and it was hilarious. I mean, he was when he read the pick. So I said it would have been funny for the Vikings long snapper to be that guy, but
but all in all, I mean, it's a good draft, better than last year.
Do we know that?
No, I knew you were going to say that too. I'm just saying my reaction to it's better, I guess.
Yeah. No, there you go.
And I've always been a wide receiver guy, an offensive guy. I think fans in general have more fun at camp when they get to watch skilled players do something versus, granted, they took a center, which is the least flashiest of all positions.
And an EC player in the second round, so you better watch it. You're going to get your dad's going to disown you if you keep calling this a good draft.
This is thin ice, man. I mean, my parents are supportive, but they're not that supportive. Come home, the locks will be changed.
That's right.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll be tracking these players in camp, and how many? Do you know off the top of your head how many weeks away like OTAs are? We're getting close to the dead zone of the season.
Actually, it's starting to happen because this Friday is the rookie minicamp. That's the first one. Then it'll probably be a couple weeks off, and I'm not sure I can look it up, but probably not quickly enough for the show. But then the OTAs start not too far behind. But this Friday is rookie minicamp where the media gets a chance to see all the new names and faces, and we'll be talking about them all over again. So
wow. Yeah, it's really, football, I always get that question, what do you do in the off season? It's like there's never nothing to talk about.
That's right.
They've really created a year-long thing, and I couldn't be any more happy. Anyway, this has been the draft edition. I'm surprised we went as long as we did. I always worry before the show that we won't have enough to talk about, and then we always go an hour.
And I always laugh at you when you do get worried because
I know
we're both so full of it.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
We take an hour and then we still fight to get in there, interrupt each other, and try to talk over each other. So yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, we both like the sound of our own voices far too much. I wanted to thank Legends Golf Course for the party. It was a beautiful location. It was a beautiful night. I got a picture that I'll share in the article for this of when the sun was going down over their golf courses. What a beautiful place that was.
It's a great track, too. Get out there and golf. It's a great place to play golf, and it's just starting to get green out.
And it's a public course, too, so if people are worried about that, you can definitely hit them up for Golf Legends golf course in Prior Lake.
It was a great party too, and for those that weren't able to make it out there, you missed it. It was a great setup. They had the golf hitting machine right there while you're watching the draft, and
simulator
drinks and great food. Oh man, it was fun. I was glad to be there.
And I didn't tell you this, but I did hit up the simulator after you left, and I was by far not the worst golfer on the Purple PTSD Vikings territory team.
Damn, should have stayed.
There were some guys that even I was thinking, man, ugh. Putting was a little hard. I don't think it was. The technology isn't there.
No, it's not.
But drive, you could really wail on that thing. Thanks to Gray Duck Vodka for sponsoring. Chad Greenway's Lead the Way Foundation also was involved in the silent auction, which went really, really well. We had people just coming in from the bar asking if they could bid on items. We had like 7 tables of items. So next year, definitely try to come, because there's some once in a lifetime opportunities from memorabilia, from autographs, jerseys from the Purple People Eaters we had a signed Randy Moss helmet, a helmet signed by Kirk Cousins, Kyle Rudolph, Adam Thielen. It was just really cool. So thanks to everyone who was involved and everyone who came to that as well. But we'll be back next Tuesday with some coverage of the rookie minicamp, it sounds like. I for some reason thought that was months away, but it sounds like it's happening. So yeah, we'll be back next Tuesday. Stay tuned to Purple PTSD, Vikings Territory, and Purple Territory Radio. We have a ton of draft coverage, reaction, breakdowns. We have some new podcasts starting. The Skull Sessions is a show that's going to be done by Ian, who is better known as the Optimistic Vikings fan on Twitter. So we got a lot cooking. But this has been Morning Joe's. Thanks for listening, and Skol.